just because I ate vegan didn't necessarily mean I was healthy. Like I was
Yeah.
like you could live an entire life based on a processed vegan diet without eating any whole foods at all. Getting familiar with ingredients lists and avoiding things where you just can't pronounce them. If you don't know what they
Yeah.
look like, if you were to say those things to your grandma, would she be able to identify what they are? If she can't, if you can't and she can't, then just don't have them in your diet, or at least keep them to a very, very minimum. 70% of everything that you apply to your skin is absorbed straight into your bloodstream, and that's going straight around your system. Same with things like aerosols. Like you're obviously not applying that to your skin if you're putting on like hairspray or you're using an air
Yeah.
freshener or a perfume, but you're breathing that in. And that's just
Mm.
again going straight into your bloodstream and right throughout your system. And that causes a lot of issues.
Cosmic people, welcome back to the show. Now, have any of you over the past few years had problems related to your gut and your stomach? I certainly have. I've been doing things like acupuncture, probiotics, looking at my diet. Obviously, we eat so much more processed foods than we used to. But I'm not an expert in this, although I know lots of my friends are also having these problems as well. So I've invited an expert on today, partly from a selfish reason, to help my own gut problems. So she is called Jasmin Corbett. She is the founder and owner of Wealthy You. Interestingly enough, she used to be an accountant, so she's doing a very different job nowadays. We're going to be talking about that, but we're mainly going to be talking about what are some problems people have related to their guts. How can you solve it? So we're going to try and make this actionable as always. And as a side note, we're also going to be talking about some of the blue zones in the world, which is places where people live the longest, they have the longest life expectancy. And why is that? Some things are related more to gut and health, but then there's other things related to community and actually the social aspects, which she's going to be talking about, particularly in Sardinia. But finally, even that social aspect is actually related to your gut as well, because the gut is like a mini brain that's connected to your actual brain and connected to your whole body. And there's lots of studies done on this. I'm going to be talking about that as well. So let's get into it and let's talk to Jasmin. Jasmin, welcome to the show. Actually, very excited, as I'm sure no one knows listening to this, but I've had my own problems with gut health, and I've taken like probiotics and done acupuncture and done all kinds of things. And obviously, you're an expert, so I'm looking forward to today's show. And yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get into this chat.
All right. Well, yeah, let's get into it. Before we kind of get tactical and talk about, a lot of the things you're currently doing with your clients, I'm always interested to hear people's own journeys because I find that often, drives our careers and our interests that we're doing. So, how did you end up getting into this thing where, you're now a wellness coach and helping people with gut health?
So it really happened by accident, to be honest. Like it wasn't kind of in my plan or in my kind of vision of the future. I was a chartered accountant, so I was working at an oil and gas company, very corporate job. Um, didn't really feel that fulfilled, but I enjoyed what I was doing. I really did. And then a few years, well, 5 years ago now, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And that was at a time where I would have said if you'd asked me that I was healthy. I was training for a lot of endurance events at the time. I was eating a vegan diet. So to me, at that time, healthy was based purely on aesthetics. It wasn't really
Yeah.
on actually what was going on inside. So when I got that diagnosis, I was quite surprised, to be honest. I didn't really expect that. Like I didn't even I was getting acupuncture at the time for the pain that I was getting in my joints because I was doing all of these endurance events. I was training so
Mm,
hard. I was at the gym 5 times a week. I was running. I was on the hills hiking every weekend. So I just kind of put the pain down to overtraining basically. And because I wasn't
mm,
really taking rest days, I pushed my body very hard at the time. So I just put it down to that. And I thought, well, when this next event is over, I'll take a break and it'll be fine. And then and then there was another event to do. So there wasn't, I was just always going from one to the other. And so I was getting acupuncture for that to help me through because there was one of the last events before I got the diagnosis that I did was a 24-hour hike. It was 5 peaks through
uh,
Scotland. I was like the week of it, I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this because my ankle pain was so bad. So I went and started getting acupuncture, and it just kept getting worse. And to the point where I couldn't even walk down the stairs at work. I was like, my office was like 3 flights up. I couldn't walk down the stairs because it felt like my knees were gonna just explode. Like it was super, super painful. And then it went into my finger, and I when I went back to my acupuncture appointment, I was like, oh, it's like my finger's got the same pain in it. And he was like, well,
Mm,
that's not for from training. You're not doing anything in the gym to warrant that. He was like, I want you to go to the doctor and get some tests done. And he was right enough. It came back that I had RA. And at the time, I was very much attached to the identity that I had, where I was like always active. I was always on the go. I
mm,
was hiking, I was running, I was doing all of these things. And then in one call with the doctor, he was like, you're giving that up. Like you can't go and do these things anymore. You're not going to be able to. It's like a disease that can't be cured. It's degenerative. So it's just about like really slowing down that process. And I was like, I'm young. Like this is what old people get. Why am I getting this thing? And what am I going to do? Who am I going to be like going forward if I can't do these things? So that really just put me on my own kind of journey of going down rabbit holes to see what I could do alternatively to heal basically and to fix myself and to avoid that prognosis that the doctor gave me. So it was really just through that and like making changes and seeing
mm,
the impact that it was having. And I wasn't really doing anything super significant. I didn't
yeah.
come like turn my life upside down. And I was always just like, why don't I know these things? Everything that I was learning seemed very obvious. And I
Yeah.
was like, why didn't I know this? Why wasn't I doing it already? And then that kind of just made me think as I was going through it, like I'm not the only one that's going to be in this
Yeah.
position. Like there's other people that's going to be getting a prognosis
Mm,
the same as me or like mine, because it's an autoimmune disease. So it's not
yeah.
from just overuse and degeneration. It's your body is basically attacking itself. And I thought, I'm not going to be the only one going through that and not understanding, not really feeling like I was getting much answers or getting told much about like what was happening other than it's just
Mm,
going to keep getting worse. So I wanted to just start getting the message out there that you can actually take control of your health and you can be empowered to do that and you can make a difference to your future regardless of what
yeah.
anybody else is telling you. So then that kind of put me down this path of coaching and health
Yeah.
coaching and I went back to school and yeah, then I eventually left the corporate world behind and just started
Yeah.
doing this and working with clients and I absolutely love it. It's the most rewarding and fulfilling thing.
Amazing. So I just wanted to clarify something because I think it's very interesting, and I've thought about this a lot, which is that so you were in very good physical shape, and I guess you could say physical shape from the outside because you were like, as you said, working out pretty much every day. You're almost like addicted to exercise. Even if you're not working out, you're hiking, and from the outside, everyone could be like, oh yeah, Jasmine, she's in great shape, but like on the inside, your gut health and obviously arthritis as well, like things weren't as they should have been. And I think often there's this misconception that we see people, I think especially in the West, that we're very goal orientated and, oh, I want to be in this shape and do this marathon or this. And actually, those people, even on the outside, they may look great, but on the inside, they're struggling as well. So, I guess one, just clarifying that was the case for you. And two, is this quite common? Is do you get a lot of people that are like going to the gym a lot, but actually, like internally, they're not doing so great?
Yeah, I would say it is actually something very common because I think I'm not alone in attaching aesthetics to health. Like if you look toned, if you look reasonably slim even, then why wouldn't you be healthy on the inside? Because that's not what we're really taught about. We're not really even taught when it comes to diet. We're taught about calories and macros. We're not
Yeah,
told about so much about the importance of the micros, which is the vitamins and the minerals and the polyphenols and the fiber that doesn't really come into the conversation so much. It's not as sexy as knowing how much protein you should have on your plate. And so I think a lot of people, I don't think it's just me, and it's through a lot of conversations I have, a lot of clients I work with, they'll think that because they look fit aesthetically and because they're able to go, or because they do go to the gym several times a week and they
mm,
do live quite an active lifestyle, that there's this misconception that they're healthy, but they could
yeah,
be doing all of those things just exactly like I was. But inside, I was suffering. And I even look back at like thinking back, I seen a picture of me. I was doing a 10K race and I had knee braces on because my knees were so sore. Just thought that it was through just again, just like overtraining, just didn't really think anything of it, just like put on a knee brace
yeah,
and get on with it. And now I know so much more about like inflammation and what that's doing to your body and the causes of all of these things. And I can go and run a marathon now and I don't need to wear any knee braces. And this is maybe 10 years on from that picture from when I was doing that race. So, like, in essence, like my joints should be getting worse as I'm getting older, but
Yeah.
actually they're getting better because I'm treating my body the way it needs to be treated rather than the way that I think it should
Mm.
because of what the scales say.
Okay, so you got this diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. The doctors kind of said stuff. You thought I want to keep in good shape, right? I don't want to be told by doctors I'm never going to be able to do certain things again. So what then happened for you personally? Like, what were some of the actions that you took in your own personal journey?
Like I said, it wasn't anything really significant. Like I started looking at my diet more and thinking that just because I ate vegan didn't necessarily mean I was healthy. Like I was
Yeah.
like you could live an entire life based on a processed vegan diet without eating any whole foods at all. So like Oreos are vegan doesn't mean that they're good for you.
Yeah.
So it was really just looking at what I was doing to my body based on what I was consuming, and not just diet. I also looked at like the toxins that I was consuming through like personal care products or cleaning products and whatever was in my environment. I really started to clean that up as well. Started to prioritize my sleep and make sure that I was getting enough rest. I was always pretty good with hydration, but again, just like looking to see where I could just maximize and optimize tiny little shifts and changes, which didn't really disrupt my life much at all,
Mm.
but really started to make big impacts on my health. Started to look at my mindset and how I could make sure that that was even more solid and that I was looking at things very positively and that I was practicing gratitude daily and that I was managing my stress levels. Um, Changing the way that I exercise too, starting to be a little bit kinder to myself rather than always pushing it to like to the extreme and to the max,
Mm.
slowing it down a little bit and realizing that I wasn't actually affecting my progress going forward, like because I was feeling better within myself.
She mentioned, yeah, like you can be vegan and still eat loads of processed foods or Oreos, right? Are you still vegan now? Like, how's your diet changed to now?
No, my diet has changed, but it's not been that significant. I still predominantly would cook like low dairy, low meat when I'm just cooking at home. But I do eat meat occasionally. I do have dairy as well. It's just about, I think, finding better balance and finding what works for you because, and this is something that I see a lot with my clients because I do a lot of sensitivities testing with them as standard. And everyone will be so surprised with the report that comes back to say like gives them the information on what trigger a trigger food is for them,
Yeah.
because very commonly something I see in a lot of reports are apples. Now, apples are typically
Well,
something that we're like an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
yeah.
They're a healthy food, but that doesn't mean yeah, like yes, there is, and there's a lot of benefit from eating an apple, but that's only if your gut is insensitive to it and you can tolerate it. Then it's good for you. If your gut can't
Yeah.
tolerate it, then it's something that you should avoid, regardless of the benefit that it's got. Now, where like the aim for kind of doing that is to do that short term, like eliminate these foods short term, so that long term your gut you can strengthen your gut and build it back up, build up that resilience, so that you can
Mm.
tolerate the foods that you are sensitive to right now, and that you should eventually be able to get to a place where you can eat those foods again, trouble free.
Yeah. So how would you like so you'd remove certain foods from your diet and then reintroduce them? And if you reintroduce them and you're still having gut problems, then hey, that's probably not a food that I should eat.
Exactly. So do figure out what those trigger foods are. There's some really common ones like dairy, gluten, certain fruits and vegetables. Um, Very inflammatory foods like refined sugars, fried foods, processed foods. Those are very inflammatory, and we should be avoiding them and minimizing our kind of
Yeah.
consumption of those anyway. But start with that and start trying to like keep a food diary. Start trying to figure out like where my symptoms are occurring, when, and what have I eaten previous to that, and where's like what's the pattern. Cut those foods out for a period of time. Let your gut just kind of heal, relax, rebalance itself, and then you can start to reintroduce those foods. And exactly like you said, at that point you should be okay to be able to tolerate the things that you've cut out. If you're not, then you know that that is something that you are intolerant to, and it's something that you've then got that information, and that it's kind of empowered, comes back to that empowerment again, where you can make the informed decisions to say, "Do you know what, I really know that eating strawberries is not good for me, and I'm probably going to run to the
Mm.
bathroom in half an hour, but right now those strawberries are just looking delicious and I'm just going to go have
Yeah.
them because they're worth the consequence. You can
Yeah.
then make that choice. And
Yeah.
you're not having to guess and trying to figure out what's going on.
Mm. And then you also talked about how, yeah, you were kind of, you know, exercising almost excessively before. Is there a link between, say, you're exercising excessively and you're eating bad foods? Is the excessive exercise almost putting like more strain on your gut as well?
Definitely. I would say that when we over exercise, we actually kind of counteract the good that it does to a certain degree. Where we're actually causing more stress in our system, which increase like especially if you're stressed, like if you've got a stressful job or if there's family stress or financial stress or whatever the source of stress is for you. If you've got a lot of stress in your life and then you're also adding on a lot of you're over exercising and you're doing a lot of training and then you're creating a lot of physical stress on your body too, your nervous system is just going to be shot. You're never really
Mm,
taking that downtime to recover. I think what's interesting, or was definitely interesting for me, and I've seen it in other people too, is the driver behind that over exercise. What is it like? Is it it can be an addiction. It can be the same as like gambling or alcohol, drugs, like
mm,
just food. We sometimes can pick different things to what we're addiction is, and sometimes they look healthier than others, and they can be something that is seen as more acceptable than others. But
yeah.
when there's something behind it where you're trying to achieve like something subconsciously, or you're trying to avoid something, or whatever it is, then it's really what's really important at that point is to look a little bit deeper, question things why, look at
Mm,
what needs to be healed, look at what it is that's not fulfilled within you. And I think for me, it was definitely kind of connected to that overachieving and looking back into like childhood as to like where does that come from? Where's this like perfectionism kind of trait coming from, and how am I channeling that into working out?
yeah. So you think there was that came from like that. And I think it's quite a Western mindset of like always on the future and oh, I've achieved this goal, I want to get to the next goal. So it was that type of mentality that was driving that.
Absolutely. Like I was never really present. I was always kind of setting my sights on a target. I was achieving it. And then as soon as I achieved it, it was just like it didn't even happen. Like it wasn't significant
Mm,
enough. There was no celebration. There was no recognition of the success. It was like, okay, I've done this. So what can I do next? What's the
yeah.
next thing? Even before I was, say it was, let's use running as an example. If I'd set my first target as like a 5K race,
Yeah.
I wasn't even over the finish line of that 5K race. And I was already thinking about like, okay, well, I can do 10K. And so if I can do 10K, then this 5K is not really that significant.
Yeah. And I think there's a balance, right? Because I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in itself, but maybe it's a bad thing if you don't pat yourself on the back and say, oh, well done, I've done this 5K. I've never done 5K before, but I reckon I can do 10K. And then when you do 10K, even if you then want to run a marathon, being like, it's great, I achieved 10K, right? So I guess it's, yeah, still striving for a better future, but also giving yourself recognition as well for your achievements.
100%. I think that key piece, like that recognition, is so important, and it's so easy to fail to recognize that. And again, I see that with a lot of clients. Like we tend to focus on the gap rather than the gain,
Yeah.
and I think that that can be that can be a big problem, can cause a lot of issues.
Yeah. So yes, let's kind of dive into the gut health stuff. What are based on your clients, and, society at large? What is some of like the big mistakes people are making when it comes to their gut health?
Oh, when it comes to gut, oh, that's a really good question. I would say big mistakes is probably underestimating the power of your mindset and like that gut brain
Mm,
connection, not really recognizing how strong that is and how much of an impact it does actually have on your physical health. If you are stressed out your box and you're not giving yourself any downtime, and there could be many reasons for why you're stressed or why we have certain patterns or certain beliefs or certain values. Um, to think that they don't have an impact on your kind of your gut health or your physical health, I think is a real there's a real gap there. And once you start to work on that and start to manage your stress levels and start to
yeah.
work on your anxiety and start to unpick everything, then that's when you can see a real big difference in your health. I think that for me was definitely a key piece in my healing journey.
Well, yeah, I can definitely I can relate to that because as I said at the start of the show, I've had my own issues with stomach problems, and I actually went to a Chinese medicine doctor who was great. But what I liked about her is when she was doing the diagnosis, it wasn't just, how is your gut feeling, etc. It's like, what do you do for work? And I said, I run my own company. Oh, you stress stuff? And I said, yeah, all the time. And she said, well, that's something you have to tackle. Stress causes gut problems, right? And as you said, it's that mind body, that gut brain connection, and it's often one we don't make. And yeah, I think for me it was a realization of maybe the things that were making me stressed, they're not going to change, but my attitude towards them can change, right? And that was like that actually, obviously it helped me with my work and my stress, but it also helped with my gut as well. Oh,
It's amazing when you can see like when you can feel the impact that getting on top of something like that. Like, yeah, our sources of stress are still going to be there. We can only control what we can control. Um, but how we react and respond to those stressors, that is within our
yeah,
control. And we can change how we show up and how we're dealing with these things. And that is so important.
yeah, 100%. Okay, yeah, what else? Like foods, or what else would you recommend?
Um, I would say when it comes to foods, for sure, it's looking at how you can have like a more whole foods diet. And like I said, a mistake that I made was thinking that following a certain diet was, and when I say I use diet interchangeably here, I try to avoid it, but it's easier for people to understand it. But if you're going on like a vegan diet or a low carb diet or an Atkins diet, whatever it might be, like all of these kind of diet fads, those aren't necessarily set up for you to be healthy. They're set up for you to restrict calories, um,
Mm,
depending on whatever the diet is, for an example. But even like a vegan diet, you can eat, like I said, a very highly processed vegan diet. That's not going to make you healthy. There's obviously different reasons as well why somebody might be vegan if it's for ethical reasons or whatever. But typically when you're thinking about your gut health, try and focus on whole foods. Don't try and focus and follow a specific diet because everybody is unique. They're
mm,
individual. Look at different kind of diet principles and look at like what the ingredients say you are eating. I think
mm,
that's something that too much of us take for granted, that we just assume that because we can buy it in the supermarket that it's
yeah,
not going to be harmful or dangerous for our health. But when you actually start to learn about these ingredients and what effect that does have on your health physically and mentally as well, it's really surprising that they're allowed to be in foods. And when we eat these things at certain quantities, they can have a very negative impact on our health. So getting familiar with ingredients lists and avoiding things where you just can't pronounce them. If you don't know what they
yeah,
look like, if you were to say those things to your grandma, would she be able to identify what they are? If she can't, if you can't and she can't, then just don't have them in your diet, or at least keep them to a very, very minimum. And just focus on whole foods, which is just like one ingredient foods, singular ingredient foods, things that don't have an ingredient list. So they're like your fruits, your
yeah,
vegetables, your legumes, your nuts, your seeds, meats, eggs, that kind of thing. If you, depending
yeah,
on, again, it's like I said before, like if you can and can't tolerate them, because what I can tolerate, maybe you can't, and
yeah,
vice versa. And yeah, like we could have a whole food apple. It's a singular ingredient that's typically healthy, but if you can't tolerate it, you should be trying to avoid it and again keep it to a minimum. So that's definitely something just to be a little bit more conscious of what what we're actually putting inside, because it's nobody else's responsibility apart from ours. It's not the supermarkets, it's not the food
mm,
manufacturers, it's not the governments to regulate these things, because they have different drivers. We're
yeah,
looking at something to eat that is going to keep us healthy and have us living longer and having us living a better, higher quality life. Um, I would say, well, maybe subconsciously, but ultimately at the end of the day, that's what I would imagine the majority of people are looking for. But these food manufacturers and these big companies, they're focusing more on profits. They're not thinking so much
yeah.
about your health.
Yeah, but I like what you said as well of still not blaming them and being like, well, even though they're selling these things and they're damaging me, it's still my responsibility. I can't be a victim of these things. I can change my relate. Just because the chocolate bars are by the aisle doesn't mean that I have to buy them.
100%. At the end of the day, your life, your health is your responsibility. It's nobody else's. And as soon as we start to give away that control, that's when things start to go wrong.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something you said because you were talking about, if you don't understand it and your granny doesn't understand it, then don't buy it. So that would be an example. I sometimes, check the back of a food package and it will have these like chemical names and I've got no idea what they are. Is that the kind of example you're talking about? Or?
Yes, exactly. Something that sounds like it was a lab. If it made in a lab, then that's the kind of ingredients I'm talking about. Something that you wouldn't be able to go into the supermarket yourself and buy that ingredient to recreate whatever that recipe is at home. Those are the ingredients that you want to be trying to avoid.
Okay. And then, so processed foods is a big thing people say, cut down your processed foods. But I think a lot of, and I'll include myself in this because I've done some research into it recently because of my gut problems, is um, I don't think a lot of people understand which foods are processed and they're sometimes surprised when they see a list of processed foods. So it's like, what are some examples of processed foods?
Um, yeah, again, another great question. I think ultra processed foods are by definition the things that you wouldn't really be able to recreate in your own kitchen at home. And the things that you could have in your shelf or in your cupboard for years or in your fridge, they could be there for a couple of weeks. And if they're not going off, if they're not moldy, if they're not starting to go stale, then do you really want to be putting that in your stomach? Like, do you want to be
Mm,
having that inside your body? So there's a really great app. There's two really good apps which I use. One of them is called Yucca and the other one is called Think Dirty. And
okay.
they've got like barcode scanners on them. So that's a really good tool that I started using years ago, and I'll still refer back to it time to time when I'm looking at something and trying to decide, like, especially if I'm in the supermarket and I'm like, right, do I want product A or product B? I'll scan them both, and whichever one comes back with the best score, that's the one I'll take. And they're really good at helping you get to know the ingredients on the list on the food packets, and they will not only tell you if that particular ingredient is good or bad, they'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So they'll tell you if it's a carcinogen, they'll tell you if it's an endocrine disruptor, they'll tell you if it's an allergen. And that's when I say, like, once you start learning about all of these different types of ingredients and all of these different types of toxins and chemicals that you
Mm,
are eating happily in your food because you don't really know any better, then that's when you start to realize that actually nobody is out there trying to save me, because they're just putting things in the food to make it more delicious, more tasty, cheaper to
yeah.
produce, which they're like, that's business. Um, and I think the sooner that you realize that, the sooner your health will start to improve.
Yeah. Well, we'll put those two apps you mentioned in the show notes if anyone wants to download those.
Yes.
So yeah, obviously we talked about food, we talked about like mindset, stress, anything else like related to gut health maybe people don't consider that, is affecting their guts.
Yes, I think a not so obvious one was one that I mentioned, was like personal care products and also cleaning products. So things like deodorant, shampoo, things that you've got around the house, air fresheners, awful one, candles, anything with fragrance in it, like your perfumes, your aftershaves, all of these things. I'm going to sound like a bit of a hippie now, but like, for me, a personal rule that I have is anything that I can't eat, I wouldn't put it on my skin.
Mm,
Because if you're putting on like a moisturizer, for example, or if you're using shower gel in the shower, 70% of what you're putting onto your skin is permeable.
mm,
It absorbs things that you put on it. So 70% of everything that you apply to your skin is absorbed straight into your bloodstream, and that's going straight around your system. Same with things like aerosols. Like, you're obviously not applying that to your skin if you're putting on like hairspray or you're using an air
yeah.
freshener or a perfume, but you're breathing that in. And that's just
Mm,
again going straight into your bloodstream and right throughout your system. And that causes a lot of issues, a lot of toxin buildup. You've don't know if you've heard the term like toxic load. That's just basically like how many of these chemicals are flying around your system, and they're not all eliminated as soon. It's not like a case of, okay, they do a once round and then you eliminate them through your normal processes. Some of these are forever chemicals. Some of these are going to stay in your body for a very, very, very long time, if not for the rest of your life. And you have to work very hard at getting rid of them and then avoiding just loading up your system some more as soon as you do get rid of them. So a personal rule for me is if I can't eat it, I won't put it on my skin. And I think that that is again something very important. And again, it's about just
Mm,
taking responsibility. It's about looking at these ingredients and saying, what is the impact that this has got on my health?
yeah.
Even on products like that are kind of sold to be good for you in terms of like good for your skin. If you've got eczema or if you've got some sort of like dry skin condition, then like use this. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but like an E45 cream, for example, that is one of the worst things that you could put on your skin. Like when you look at those ingredients, I would never use that on my body. But it's something that we all could, that's a very popular brand that we know that
Mm,
is looks very harmless. Look, it's meant to be good for you. It's meant to solve a lot of problems. But actually, especially if you're using it a lot, can cause a lot of problems and again, cause a lot of inflammation and a lot of buildup in your system. So we need to look at when we think about gut health, I think we can easily just focus on diet alone,
yeah.
but we actually need to start looking at it holistically and start looking at our lives and everything that we're doing and saying like, right, what impact has all of these things got
Mm,
on our gut health and our overall health and our well-being? Because it's not, no system is looked at singularly. Everything is connected
yeah.
in the body. So if we start to think that we can just fix our gut health or fix our IBS or whatever it is by only looking at diet and only looking at
Mm,
diet in terms of like, is this going to make us fat or is this going to make us thin? Then
yeah.
we're not really going to make much difference into healing our gut and starting to fix those issues.
Yeah. What would you say? You mentioned, let's just say shower gel as an example then. Like if there's certain, well, E45, what are the products you use personally? If you like, how are you able to wash, I guess?
Yeah, so I just look for like soap. I now love, like I was a very big into like products, and I had a different cream, a different potion for absolutely everything. Like you could have looked at my kind of vanity cabinet and it was just packed with bottles. And now I have very little. And honestly, it hasn't really made any difference. Like you don't need all of those products that you think like
Yeah.
were marketed that we do need. And so for me, like I just go for like natural soap bars. So you can find them pretty easily. You won't tend not to find them in like big supermarkets, but you'll find them in smaller little kind of stores and health food shops and like a Holland and Barrett kind of idea. You can go in and you can find just a natural soap bar. Very effective. Absolutely no different to shower gel, apart from the fact that it's a bar of soap and not a bottle.
Yeah.
And there's some really great brands out there, and I've tried so many different ones in the past, but one that I've kind of found and I've stuck with is a brand called Tropic Skincare. It's an
Okay.
Australian-based company, and they're vegan, they're cruelty free, they're all natural products, they're certified organic now, so a lot of their ingredients are now changing in the products that they're using, and they are more organic now, which is even better because then there's no sprays and pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and
Yeah.
all of these synthetic chemicals sprayed on the crop that's then being used in the product. And it's kind of, for me, it's just easy because it's a one stop. I can
Mm,
go and put away one order and I get all of my products that I use from them. And yeah, like I said, it's a very minimal amount now because you actually realize that you don't need so much. You don't need to be applying lip balm every 5 minutes. You don't need to be,
mm,
I don't know. You don't need like a 20-step facial regime every day because it's just not really that necessary.
yeah. 100%. I wanted to just ask something on the food side of things. What about like portions of food as well, do you think? Because I've noticed that if you like eat too much, I can also give you gut problems. Like what do you advise clients when it comes to like portions of food?
I definitely advise mindful eating, and that is just becoming very aware of what you need to eat, like what your body is telling you. Because I could say to you, right, weigh out your food, and I want every meal that you eat to weigh, I don't know, 400 grams or whatever it is.
Mm,
And I can't even think what that looks like, but then you're going to have differences throughout the day. You're going to have differences day on day, depending on what you've done beforehand. Have you worked out that day? Have
yeah.
you gone on a particularly long walk? Have you done nothing? If
Yeah.
it's like for a woman, like what time in her cycle is she on? Because that's going to vary the amount that she needs to eat during that time. So just becoming very in tune with your body. And I think this is um a big thing that we need to learn is like we've lost the innate wisdom of our body. Our
Mm,
body is giving us signs and signals daily, hourly of what's going on inside. What like it's trying to tell you, it's trying to give you that feedback constantly, but we just ignore it. We dismiss it. We accept that as that's actually what normal feels like because and I think this is very common, especially with gut issues, is that I could eat something and need to run to the bathroom half an hour later. And I could say to my friend, like, oh, that really didn't agree with me. And she'll say, oh, same. And so you just think, oh, well, that's just normal then, because I'm having these types of conversations with people and we're all experiencing the same or
mm,
similar. How many people do you know could go and have like a very heavy Indian takeaway and they're going to suffer for it that night or the next morning? But everybody is, or the majority of people are going to be able to say that they also have issues with it. So why would you
yeah.
think that that's anything but normal? But that's your body's way of saying, actually, we didn't like that food. That food didn't serve us that well. And we're maybe a little bit sensitive
Mm,
to that. And there's something going on as to why I'm sensitive to that, because really I shouldn't be. So I think if we just kind of like tap back into our bodies and just listen to the signals and the messages
yeah.
that they're giving us, then we'll be able to pay attention to that and we'll be able to take action accordingly. But we've lost that ability along the way because we became so distracted by external and
Yeah.
everything that's happening out here that we've really lost that internal wisdom.
Yeah.
So I've kind of went off on a bit of a tangent there, but yeah. Oh,
No,
you
I
asked
think
about
it's,
portion size.
yeah.
So just being a little bit more mindful and listening to what your body is needing. And I think something again, like just going back to that kind of like external distraction is that when we sit with a plate of food or any sort of food in front of us, we're going to be sitting on our phone, we're going to be answering emails, we're maybe got the TV on in the background, we're going to be watching that at the same time as like using an iPad here, or maybe we're trying like there's so much things going on at the same time as you're trying to eat your meal that you've eaten it and
Yeah.
you've got absolutely no idea what you just tasted because
Yeah.
your mind was
That's
somewhere
yeah.
else. You were so distracted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
I
a
think
real
that's a
that's
very
sorry, I was just gonna say that's a
you
very good point because I think, people talk about no phones at dinner, more because presence, like enjoying the conversation, right? Or, don't have distractions, but it's also to listen to your, not just to listen to the other person, but also to listen to your own body as well. That's a really good point.
Yes, because then you can pick up the cues. You can actually realize, like, once you start to pay attention, and by mindful eating, it is just like, it's really just paying attention to what you're eating. Like, what can you smell? What can you taste?
Mm,
Like, what's the textures? All of these things that we don't really notice when we're answering an email or watching an
yeah.
episode of whatever on TV. You could be eating anything, and your brain's not really, you're not picking up that loop of feedback that's saying, like, oh, this is really delicious, or this is really nice, or actually, this flavor is not so great, and it's my body's telling me it's not so great because it's
Yeah.
a kind of like a pre-warning sign of what's to come. And when you start to listen to those cues, then your body will say to you, okay, that's enough food now, we're full.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of portion size as well, it's your body's very, very clever and it's very wise. And you could go and eat fast food dinner. And I don't know if you've noticed this. I certainly have in the past, where within 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I'm thinking, oh, I'm a little bit peckish again. Like I maybe wasn't so full. Like I thought I was full, but I'm not that satisfied. I need to go find something else. That's not because of the quantity that you just ate and how full your stomach was of food. That's because of the lack of nutrients. And your
Yeah.
body's triggered you to go to be hungry again within a short amount of time because it's saying, we need vitamin C, we need vitamin E, we need all of these different nutrients that we haven't got. We've not been satisfied from that meal you've just given us. So you need to go and find, like, try again, basically, and go and find us that things that we really need. So when it comes to food, it's not just looking at the quantity of it as well to say, like, okay, this plate is going to fill me. It's like, yeah, it might fill you temporarily because there is quantity there, but if the
Yeah.
quality isn't there, then you're going to need to go and get some more anyway, because we're still looking for that nutrition.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I also, it made me think, as I said at the start of the show to you, I've just been in Southeast Asia for a few weeks. And You mentioned a good point there, which is like every day is going to be different. And normally I exercise, 4 or 5 times a week in London, and because like you're burning calories and eat more food, and I wasn't while I was out there. And there was like a day where I woke up and I just felt full because I had a very heavy meal the night before, and I didn't have breakfast. And it wasn't because I'm doing intermittent fasting. It was just like, no, my body's telling me I'm full. I don't need to breakfast. And then by lunch, I was hungry, right? So it's just like small things like that actually seem like common sense, but a lot of people are like, oh, I need to have breakfast every day, even if my body's telling me not to have breakfast. Yeah.
Exactly, just because it's routine. We'll get to time, especially like I said, I used to work a corporate job, so you would get to lunchtime and it would just be like your body's not necessarily telling you're hungry, your brain is just saying it's lunchtime, time to take a break and go eat some food. And you're just going to go and eat whatever you've packed and taken with you that day, or wherever you're going to go and get your lunch from. It's
Um,
not necessarily because you're listening to your body saying I'm hungry. It's because of the routine of what your day to day usually looks like to say it's
yeah.
time to go eat now.
Yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, last topic I wanted to cover with you, you've got quite an interesting article that we'll put in the show notes about the time spent in Sardinia, which is one of these blue zones. So to let anyone know that's listening, what are the blue zones are basically areas of the world where people have very long life expectancies. So there's, yeah, Sardinia, which you'll talk about. There's Okinawa in Japan, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Ikaria in Greece, and then Loma Linda in California. So those are the five. But yeah, you spent a long time in Sardinia, which is one of them, and I think it was very eye-opening for you. So yeah, could you tell us about that experience?
It was extremely eye-opening for me, and because I've learned about the blue zones for years, but at the start of last year, I was like, "Do you know what? Like, I'm actually going to go to these places and live the lives that they're living and experience the days that they're having, rather than just reading it in a book to see like what I can learn a little bit different." And to be honest, I didn't expect to learn as much different, or for maybe it to hit in a different way as what, because like I said, I'd done a lot of research, I'd done a lot of reading on them. So I didn't expect for it to change that much. But and at the time, at the start of last year, I naively thought I'll go and spend a month in each of these places. And then after my first month in Sardinia, I was like, I've barely scratched the surface. Like I'm gonna need a lot longer. So I've only been to that one so far. But what I learned and what I seen and what I experienced was very eye-opening. And I think for me, like one of the obvious things when I was walking around there, especially during winter season, so there was like low tourists, so it was you were more seeing locals. And I mean, I looked, I didn't see anybody overweight, nobody obese, nobody that could have been like on a diet. I seen very normal, healthy looking bodies. Now, what surprised me about that was actually seeing the way that they eat and the way that they're living their lives, because it's typically what we are told to avoid and what is quote unquote unhealthy or high calorie foods. Man, those Sardinians eat about a kilo of pasta a day. They're eating pizza multiple times a week. They're drinking daily. And like just those three things alone, like we're told, like, or what we know of is that that is very unhealthy things to do. And I think that that comes back to the quality of the food, because they're maybe eating that much pasta, but the majority of them, like some of them, you can't go like the pasta aisle in a supermarket in Sardinia is about a mile long. It's huge. But also they're making their own pasta at home. So they're going through that physical process of like kneading the
Mm,
dough,
mm,
of preparing it all. Like, and that's very time consuming. Same with the pizzas. Like they're going through that process of cooking it. And man, like going to a farmer's market in Sardinia takes forever. You can't just like quickly nip and go and get something for your lunch, like to make a salad, because they'll go there and they're asking the producer and the seller like so many questions. Where did this come from? How was it grown? Where, like, when was it picked? Everything. And they're like picking up every tomato and they're smelling it and they're feeling it. And they're like, right, I'll have this one. I don't want, like, they're so
mm,
selective over the quality of the foods that they eat. And there's a different, like, section of the market for each one. You'll go to here for your tomatoes. You'll go to that one for your grapes. You'll go to this one over there for your eggs. You'll go to that one for your beef. You'll go to that one for your fish. Like, and I loved that aspect of it, and it was just the time that they take, and the love that really does go into food there makes such a huge difference. It's not the pizza or the pasta, necessarily. It's the quality of the ingredients and how they're actually making it and how they're eating it, because they're eating it all together. A meal is an experience.
Mm,
It's not just something that you throw down your throat quickly in between work in the gym or work and whatever. It's something that you're actually experiencing. And I think that that all together again makes so much difference, because you're tasting the food, you're enjoying the food, you're enjoying the company of the people that you're with. Um, so that was like a big part, and same with the drinking. Like, I think especially in the UK, we've not got a great drinking culture,
sure,
and
yeah.
that it's very much we save it till the weekend and we go out and we just get absolutely blitzed, and then we'll suffer for it the next day, and we'll maybe go and do it again a second night,
Yeah.
and then we'll suffer for it more the next day, and then we'll go back to work, we'll feel a bit shit on the Monday, and then we'll gradually feel better as the week goes on, and then the process
Mm,
starts again. Over there, they're finishing work and they're going to a bar and they're meeting their friends and they're having a drink. They'll have an aperitivo and then they'll be going home and they're having their dinner, or they're going out for dinner, and that will literally take them their entire evening. But the process, and I'm not necessarily advocating alcohol consumption through this, because it doesn't have much nutrient, it has zero nutrient value. But the value that it brings for them in that social setting, they're finishing their work, they're switching off, they're going to a bar and they're meeting their friends, and they're deloading their day. They're unleashing all of that stress that might have built up through the day. They're getting rid of that at night, and they're socializing, they're connecting, they're strengthening their bonds and their relationships, and they're doing it over a wine or an Aperol Spritz. That the benefit of that has been shown to actually contribute to why they're living such long and healthy lives. It's not the effect of the alcohol
mm,
isn't kind of like isn't being outweighed by the positive effect of the connection that they're having while they're drinking it. So how they do things is very different to how we do things,
yeah.
even with the same kind of the same basic ingredients, like if it's alcohol or pizza or pasta, just for three examples, like we can be eating them in very different ways and experiencing them in very different ways, and the outcomes are very different, even though there is like the initial inputs are the same, which I found
Yeah.
very interesting. Another very interesting thing that I seen when I was there was their view of success, and I think that one personally hit me very hard.
Okay.
So I think going like walking around the streets in the village, and I stayed in like my main base was in one of the was the biggest city in Sardinia. And so just I spent a lot of time just like walking around the streets and really just started getting like a feel for how people lived. And the houses weren't huge and fancy. The cars weren't the latest models. They weren't expensive. They were a tool to get from A to B. And I think like when you actually speak to the people there, their view of success isn't their job title, it's not the company that they work for, it's not the car they're driving, it's not the house they're living in or the holidays that they're going on. Barely any of them leave the island. Why would they? They take a vacation from work and they're going to the beaches and they're going around their home and experiencing different parts of the island. Um, whereas opposed to our view of success, like that's typically our view of success. Their view of success is how much time they're spending with their family. How much time are they spending doing the hobbies that they enjoy? How much, like, what's the quality of their life like? They're not going to spend 6 days, 70 hours a week in the office and knock their box out for a certain salary. They'll actually sacrifice the salary. They'll take a lower salary for actually a higher quality of life. They'll go
Mm,
and they'll do their work, they'll go and do their jobs, and they may or may not be so enthusiastic about it, but they're making sure that that is very balanced with the quality of their life outside of work, and that they are doing the things that they enjoy doing, and that I see that definitely had such a big impact on the quality of their health, the
mm,
quality of their years,
yeah.
and why they're living so long. And they work longer too. Like they don't get to 60 or 65 and retire. They continue working because they're enjoying doing it. It's giving them purpose. They're even when they do stop working, they're still active every day.
Yeah.
Like I said, like they're cooking the pasta and the bread from scratch. They're going and the things that they're doing around the house in their day to day, things that we do for convenience. Like even a remote control for your garage, or the remote control lawnmower, or a remote control robotic Hoover that we've got nowadays. Like none of those things exist there because they're all going and manually doing these things by hand. And it might be saving, or it might be saving us 5, 10 minutes here, an hour
Yeah.
there if you've got a bigger garden that you need to cut the grass. But that's actually costing us years off of our life.
Yeah.
Whereas for them, they're doing these things that's maybe taking them longer in a day to do, but they're gaining an extra 20 years at the other side.
Yeah, it's a great point. The focus on efficiency is often actually a bad thing for our physical health because, as you said, maybe mowing your garden or cleaning your flat or hoovering, whatever. That's actually a form of exercise, right? And I think their view of success, as you said, being different to ours, that also ties into what you were saying about the community aspect as well, which I found very interesting. I've done that research into these blue zones as well, and I don't think they've got technically a blue zone, but one of my friends who's Spanish, I had this interesting conversation with him because I think Spain in some studies has like overtaken Japan as like with life expectancy. And he said, I don't understand it because our diet's bad. We eat like chorizo and like, fatty foods, processed foods. We smoke more than a lot of other
Yeah.
European nations. But he said, I think the thing we've got is the social aspects. Like we're very social and we go out and like you said, we go out for dinner together and like we drink together and, eating and drinking is a social thing. It's not something you do like alone. And obviously now there's like data to back this up, and there's these blue zones where people are like that as well. Oh,
I think that social connection is huge. And I think it's something that typically the way we live, because we have a goal, we have a vision, we're working towards it, wherever that may be, we can become so kind of like single tracked. And we're like,
yeah,
I mean, you could see the evolution of even from like your teens to your early 20s to your late 20s to your early to mid 30s. Like you can see the evolution of that if you look at your timeline and how much time you spend with your friends and even your
yeah,
family during that. Like it gets less and less and less because trying to align the schedules of 2, 3, 4 people in their early 30s, especially if they've got kids and they've got
yeah,
families and they've got careers, can be a near on impossible task.
yeah,
Whereas over in the because of all of the commitments we've got day to day, we've got a lot going on, understandably. But if you look at these blue zones in different areas that where people are living longer, that's not the case. It's very easy to organize social gatherings because they're prioritizing that above certain other things that we would typically prioritize. Usually in we're prioritizing these things because of the lifestyle that we want to get in a few years' time, and we want to live in retirement in this way, and we want to have these accolades, and we want to have this income or whatever it is. We're prioritizing our day to day and our routines and our
mm,
schedules in alignment with that. Whereas in these countries in these areas, they're prioritizing and aligning their schedules with what makes them actually happy and what improves the quality of their life. And that is connection. And it's very, very important. And that was definitely something that again opened my eyes, and just seeing the absolute value and importance of that, not just for the quality of your life, quality of your time right now, but for the quality of your life long term.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, been a fascinating chat, Jasmine. I've learned a lot. We'll put a link to the article on Blue Zones. We'll put a link to your socials. Any other resources that you wanted to share with people?
I've just launched a new website and a new kind of like free training, so that I can give you the link for that as well. That's a really cool. It was sort of a long time in the making to kind of get pull all of this together, and just more free resources and more free value to give to people. So I can send you the link for that as well.
Perfect. Well, yeah, as I said, thanks a lot, Jasmine. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Very interesting section there on the blue zones at the end. I think we could do a whole podcast on that. Maybe we will one day, but I just wanted to give you my takeaways more on the gut health side of things. So number one, which sounds really simple, but most people do, which is listen to your body and be mindful of your body. So if your body is full, don't eat more. Listen to your body. Your body is telling you it's full. And as I said, that example of if you have a really heavy meal one night and the next morning you wake up and you're still feeling very heavy, you don't need to have breakfast, right? You can skip meals, you can skip things if your body is telling you not to eat. I think that's really important, being mindful. The second thing kind of relates to the blue zones actually, which is like when possible, like experience food in community, right? And going to the theme of the podcast, that's going to improve your spirit, right? So rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to have this processed meal at home, give a friend a call and say, hey, do you want to come over for dinner, or do you want to go out for dinner, or whatever it is, right? That's really important, that community aspect of eating. Number three, which I thought was really interesting, was related to like skin products as well. And even she gave the example of hairspray. So be looking into those things as well, have natural products for skincare. Number four is related to like your mental health, right? Often if you've got gut problems, it's not always the foods you eat, it's your mental health. So if you're like really stressed at work, that can affect it. So like be tackling that first. We could obviously do a whole nother podcast on that. And then number four, yes, the foods, like processed foods. Don't eat processed foods. How can you spot processed foods? Look at the back, and if it's got very chemical sounding names, then those are probably foods to avoid. So if you know anyone going through gut health problems or want to share this with anyone, please share it with them. If you can subscribe, leave a review, that really helps us, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.